Today, I'm simply a messenger. I'm here to share the values my parents have instilled in my siblings and I, but they are also the core values of the business they own today. My parents are the owners of R&B Enterprises, a machining company that has been awarded Boeing Supplier of the Year 3 times out of the 23,000 businesses Boeing has worked with. But it wasn't always like this. Keep these 2 words in the back of your minds throughout this talk: risk and determination. Today, I'm here to speak on behalf of my parents to share you their story. My parents were among the 2 million people who escaped Vietnam after the fall of Saigon in 1975. My dad escaped in 1981, and my mom escaped in 1983. The first time my mom escaped, she was actually caught and jailed for 2 weeks before being able to bribe the guards with jewelry to set her free. My parents, like a lot of the Vietnamese people, escaped by fisherman boat, a lot like this one. These boats were crammed with people, sometimes 60 people on the lower end, but as many as 150 people in some cases. This is where the term boat people was derived from. People were fleeing Vietnam because after the fall of Saigon, South Vietnam faced a lot of persecution and dangers. Former government officials, soldiers, and supporters of the Vietnamese government, the Southern Vietnamese government, were sent to re-education camps where they were tortured, faced hard labor for many years, and even execution. And at a lot of the times, these executions were carried out without any formal convictions or trial. If somebody accused you of being a supporter or any relationship between the Southern Vietnamese government, you were going to be sent to this re-education camp. An estimated 150,000 people died in these camps, so people were fearing for their lives, so they took the risk and escaped the country. While 2 million people escaped Vietnam, 400,000 people did not make the trip. My uncle, my mom's brother, was among the 400,000. While in Thai waters, his boat was attacked by pirates, where goods were robbed, women were raped and taken as sex slaves, and then the pirates sank the ship, leaving the men for dead. It's really unfortunate to say that my uncle's story is not rare. Many boats faced pirate attacks, storms, starvations, and sometimes they were just at sea for so long they never made it ashore again. For people who did make the trip, they stayed in refugee camps in neighboring countries, such as Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. My dad's boat sailed to Malaysia, where he stayed in the refugee camp in Pulau Bidong for a couple months before relocating to another refugee camp within the country. My mom, who escaped 2 years after him, actually stayed in the exact same camp as him in Pulau Bidong before resettling to Seattle. That's Pulau Bidong. The orderly departure program spanning from 1975 to 1994 helped Vietnamese refugees resettle to Western countries, with the majority, like my parents, relocating to the United States and others emigrating over to European countries in Seattle. Refugees who had priority in being relocated had family already in the Western countries. Because my mom already had her sisters in Seattle, she only stayed in the refugee camps for a couple months before emigrating over. My dad, on the other hand, he faced some situations. Because he didn't have blood relatives over in any of the countries, almost every Western country rejected him. So he ended up staying in the refugee camps for 2.5 years. After that, the United States finally came and gave him the thumbs up to immigrate over. And he said it was because he was there for so long, they felt bad for him. So now my dad was in California and my mom was in Seattle. My dad's uncle helped him enroll in technical college, where he pursued machining because at the time he didn't speak English very well, so machining didn't require a lot of speaking, but a lot of technical skills, so he thought it was a good suit for him. He ended up graduating top of his class, scoring a 96% on the final exam, where the final average was only a 56%. My mom, she went to Ingram High School in Seattle and then went on to graduating at North Seattle Community College and became a certified medical assistant. In 1990, when tensions between the United States and Vietnam eased, Vietnamese refugees who escaped were able to go back to Vietnam to visit family. During the long flight, everybody was so nervous, and there was a lot of talking. And you know where I'm going. Yes, my parents were on the exact same flight, and after a little bit of talking, they found out that their village was only 20 minutes away from one another. So the plane landed, and my dad went back to visit his family, and he decided to pay a little visit to my mom and her family in her village. And you know what's really cute? They booked the same flight back, and they managed a long-distance relationship and married 2 years later in 1994. 2 years after that, they had their first child, and that was me. So fast forward, after they had my twin brothers, we decided to move to Seattle to be closer to my mom's intermediate family. At the time, my parents were working both full-time, my mom as a medical assistant in the international district, and my dad was working day and night shifts as a machinist. After moving between companies, he got a job at R&B Enterprises. But after a dispute with an employee, he decided to leave. When he was working at R&B, though, the owner briefly mentioned about wanting to sell the business to him. But when my dad left, and after a couple months, the owner unexpectedly died of cancer. So my dad went back to the son asking if he was still willing to sell the business. And R&B Enterprises was very profitable at the time. So the son refused. There was no reason to sell the business that was profitable. Fast forward 2.5 years later, and R&B Enterprises was on the brink of bankruptcy, and the son finally came back asking my dad to buy the business. And let me add this really quickly. My dad really wanted to own a business. I remember growing up, he would bring home so many franchise brochures because he was actually thinking about opening up one. So my dad took the opportunity, took out a mortgage, and used it as a down payment to buy the business. And when it was finally his, he realized how bad it was. The previous owners was so behind in production that the phones was ringing off the hook, and on the other line, angry customers were threatening to sue. But my dad apologized, explained the situation, and strategized the best plan to start production. Within 2 weeks, the phone call stopped, and that's because products started leaving the shop and into customer hands. My dad was working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and my mom was working full-time as a medical assistant and still was helping him at the shop while juggling to raise us kids. My parents bought the business in 2008, and that's when the recession hit. Bad luck, right? So, you remember how bad the recession was. Houses were up for foreclosure, small businesses were closing, but R&B Enterprises was still in business. It was actually increasing 10 to 15% every single year. And that's because the businesses my dad was working with was spreading word to other businesses that R&B Enterprises was never short on projects or jobs. My parents were able to pay any accumulated debt in 3 years' time, and in 2012, they were awarded Boeing Supplier of the Year for the first time. In 2013, they were awarded another award. And in 2014, they won another Boeing Supplier of the Year award. And my parents are pretty confident they're going to win again this year. This Vietnamese boy who didn't even have a high school diploma managed to climb his way up to be a successful business owner. My parents, after going through what they've been through, they never gave up. At the beginning of this talk, I told you to remember these 2 words, risk and determination. Those are the 2 values my parents have taught my siblings and I, and they're also the core values of their business. My parents risked their lives to come to this country in hopes of a better one, not knowing whether or not they were going to make the trip. Once here, despite of the language barriers and obstacles, they were determined to make a living for themselves. Furthermore, R&B Enterprises focuses on prototyping, one of the riskiest specialties to be in because of the increased rate of failure. Sometimes projects just didn't go as planned, final products just didn't fit in the machine right, But my dad never gave up. He didn't give up when others would have, and he would spend countless hours at the shop or at home until the final product was perfect. Being a child to Vietnamese parents that have gone through what they've been through, the values they have taught me is prominent in my everyday life. My parents are my best friend, so I come to them for everything: life problems, school problems, or just doubts in general. And they always say the same thing over and over. And this is my mom's favorite saying: if you think you can, you can. Sometimes your goal is just going to be risky, but you just have to be determined. Sometimes the path to your goal is going to be short, but oftentimes you're going to have to take a detour. Be determined, and sometimes your goal is going to be risky. But my dad always says, you miss 100% of the risks you don't take. So, risk and determination, those are the two things my parents and I want you to take away from this talk. Thank you.